Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video I am talking through my top tips for drawing fur in graphite pencils. Before I get into this video, I do actually have the real-time tutorial of this video in full with narration over on my Patreon. So if you would like to check that out, I have details on the screen right now, as well as a link to my Patreon in the description. I've just launched Patreon and I'll be uploading real-time tutorials plus loads of other rewards on there each month. But anyway guys, let's jump right into this tutorial. Okay, so firstly I'm starting off by using a very light pencil. I am using the Faber Castell graphite pencils, and I'm starting off by using the lightest shade of pencils, and that is the 2H pencil. So the 2H pencil is one of the lightest shades of graphite, and the reason why I start off by using the lightest shades of graphite is because we want to work from light to dark. So it's one of the biggest tips and most important things to do when you are doing any drawing. You want to make sure that you start off very lightly. If you start off lightly, it means that you can work in layers, and layers are really important because the more layers you add to a drawing, the more it adds depth to your drawing and realism. Plus with fur, as there is so much fur, you want to be able to show fur growth, and layers will help you to build up on that fur growth. What I like to do first of all is just map in the general direction of the fur, the type of fur, length of fur and fur clumps, and to do this I like to use the tip of the pencil, and I just use stroking motions to add in those fur strokes. I mainly add those fur strokes in one direction. I try and avoid going back and forth because this can create harsh lines, but it also means that it can concentrate a lot of graphite in one area. And for now, I just want to keep this pencil shading light and quite basic. Now the reason why I like to map out all of the fur first is because it helps me to really understand where everything goes. So I like to take my time to study the reference photo and make sure that I am adding in the fur where it needs to go. And then I like to build up on all of the shading, tone and values once I have in the basic fur clumps and strokes. I'm also looking at how the fur is gathered and collected, so there are some areas where the fur is a little bit thicker, and to show this I like to thicken some of those fur areas just by gently shading in some more value. So for example, at the bottom there I'm just using the 2H pencil and just shading in some more pencil gradient in to darken up the fur a little bit so that I know that the fur collects at the bottom. So now we are moving on to the blending, and blending is really important when you are drawing fur in graphite pencils. If you are drawing fur in coloured pencils, I often use lighter shades of pencil to add value down, which aids with blending and adds tone. But for graphite drawings, I like to use cotton buds or soft tissue paper to soften out some areas. I will be blending in between layers as well, so I'll add layers of pencil one layer at a time, and then in between the layers I will blend out the pencils with the cotton bud before going back in with some more pencil. The reason why I like to use cotton buds for blending is because they are quite small and gentle, so they are good for blending out smaller areas. Plus they don't contain oils on them like your fingers do, so you won't get splotches or discoloration on the paper. As I said, I'm blending out those pencils in between layers. So now that I've blended out the pencils a bit, I'm going back in with the graphite pencils, but this time I am using a B pencil. The B pencil is darker and softer than the 2H pencil, so that means it's going to add darker value down onto the paper, and this is important because we do want to be constantly building up on our values and intensifying the fur clumps and making them just stand out. So by going in with the B pencil, it starts to add some details back in, but I'm still using it quite lightly so we can build up on all the layers gradually, because I don't want to burnish too early on. And for anyone that doesn't know what burnishing is, it basically just means when you apply a really hard pressure onto the paper where it fills in the paper grain and you can't add any more layers. We don't want to be doing that right now, because if we do, the fur will look very flat and it won't have a lot of depth or look three-dimensional or realistic. So all I am doing is just redefining some of those fur strokes by going back over them with the B pencil. Now at this stage, if you start to notice some of the lines look a little bit messy or scruffy, then don't worry about that too much, because you can always blend out some of those areas with cotton buds or keep adding in pencil layers so that it will smoothen all of those harsh lines out. Right now, all I am worried about is just getting in some of the details I lost when I blended out using the cotton bud, and just indicating where some of those darker sections of fur are. I use soft, quick flicking motions to draw the fur in, and what this does is just create the fur lines, and that mimics the real fur on the animal. I'm also looking at which areas of the fur have thicker fur or fur that is more collected. I said a bit earlier on that I like to thicken those areas of fur by adding more fur clumps and strands, and that is what I am doing here. Where the fur is thicker, I'm adding in more detail, and where it is more sparse, I'm just adding in less pencil strokes. I like to just mark out the sections of fur initially with my pencil strokes, and then I will go in with the pencils in the surrounding areas just to add some more value down and blend out any harsh lines. And as I said, I will also use the cotton buds to aid with the blending. When you are drawing fur, what you don't want to do is create any harsh lines or have any areas with really thick fur and then areas where you haven't really drawn any fur in, because what that does is just make the fur look really separated and broken up and just not very realistic. So I would definitely recommend that you draw in the fur for the whole section and then just build up on your values and add more fur into the areas that need it. But always make sure that your transitions between sparse and finer fur is soft and gradual going into the much thicker fur. A top tip I have for ensuring that all of the fur transitions nicely into each other is just by simply making sure that you pull up some of the thicker fur into the areas that have less fur. So for example, say you had one section of fur that was really collected together, make sure that you do drag some of that fur down into the surrounding areas with your pencil strokes so that it creates a seamless transition and natural fur growth. What I am doing now is also building up on those values. So I started off with a 2H pencil and I've been slowly working my way up to some darker shades of graphite. For this tutorial I am using the 2H, B, 3B and 6B pencils, so they are giving me a wide enough gradient to go from light to dark. It's really important to build up on fur gradually, so I started with the 2H pencil because I wanted some value down, but I didn't want to go in with a dark pencil or a really heavy hand, because if I did that then the fur would look too dark, flat and unnatural. If you build up gradually, it means that you can really focus on your techniques, contrast and values. You can judge better where you need to keep areas light and where you need to darken areas up. Whereas if you just go straight in with a dark pencil, it's going to be really hard to lighten the pencil up. Also, another reason why you don't want to be going in with a dark graphite pencil is because the darker graphite pencils give off a lot of shine. So what that means is when your drawing catches the light, it will glare, and this is going to create a horrible finish to your drawing, which you really don't want. Instead, if you use much lighter graphite pencils and then just use the darker pencils later on when you need it, you'll get less shine because you used less darker graphite pencils. So now what I am doing is I'm starting to add some much darker value down, and I'm adding in this darker value in the areas that need it. So for example, there are shadows in the fur, areas of fur that are clumped together, and also the top and bottom sections of the fur are darker as well. I've just zoomed in a little bit more on the drawing so you can see exactly what I am doing here, and as you can see I'm just using two techniques here. I'm shading in some light value down by using the side of the pencil, and I'm also using the tip of the pencil to add in some fur strokes. This is just to help me a little bit with blending. So if I feel some areas are too white, by shading in some graphite pencil I can then blend that out with the cotton buds, and then what that does is evenly distribute the graphite and value across that section of fur. We don't just want to leave one area white, because if we do that it won't look natural. Also at this stage the fur does look a little bit scruffy, and that is okay because as I said I blend between layers anyway. For the final stage of drawing fur with graphite pencils, I actually do like to use an eraser to create highlights. I am using the Tombo mono eraser for this technique, and I love this eraser because it is small and easy to lift up graphite in small areas and create some really small highlights. Plus it's a little harder than a kneaded eraser, so that means that it's able to lift more graphite up and really lift those highlights. All I am doing is working into some of those areas where I've laid down some of the graphite, and I'm creating fur details by etching the eraser over some of the fur strands and pulling up some fine fur details. This is one of my favourite techniques for pulling up highlights and fur strands, because what it does is not only lift those highlights, but it creates realistic looking fur strands and really lightens areas up and makes the fur very three-dimensional. And the great thing about this technique as well is that you really can go as light as you need to, because the graphite will just lift off that paper, and even if you do lift up too much graphite, it is so easy to just add some darker value again until you're happy with how that section of fur looks. So I will often repeat this process several times until I'm completely satisfied with how the fur looks. I'll add in layers of graphite pencil first, and then I will use the Tombo mono eraser to pull up those highlights, and then I'll use my pencils to go back in and add some more value if I feel the highlights are too harsh, and then I just erase again and just repeat the steps as much as I need to. So like I am doing now, I'm just using the graphite pencils to go back in with some dark values in the areas that I feel I lighten too much, and I focus on the areas that are darker, more shadowed and more clumped together. I will also use the cotton buds as well if I do feel that some areas look too harsh or some of the fur is out of place, and also the cotton buds help to just dull down some of the highlights as well. So if they look too light, you can just darken them up by blending some graphite back over them. Now of course you don't have to just use cotton buds either, you can also use blending stumps, tissue paper or even a clean dry paintbrush for blending. It's entirely up to you what you use, and just use the items that you do feel most comfortable to use, but definitely don't use your fingers. But anyway guys, that just about finishes off this tutorial, and as I said, this is available over on Patreon. I have the full real-time tutorial for this, which is about an hour long. If that is something that would interest you, as I said, I'm going to leave a web address on the screen right now for you guys, and also I've got a link to my Patreon in the description below, so do go and check that out. That is available for the $5 patrons. I really do hope that you found this tutorial useful today and that you picked up a lot of helpful techniques on how to draw fur. And anyway guys, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye everyone!